I've got to ask you two unrelated Alan Jones questions. I'll be back with Alan Jones at 8 o'clock tonight, and we'll have a good chat then. But while I've got you, of course, you were the health minister who established Australia's first pandemic plan.
Yep.
You bought up all these medical supplies to create a national stockpile. You spoke on a number of occasions here and overseas about the risk of a pandemic. I think it was in and around all the SARS issues when you were in the job. Is this the pandemic you warned us about those years ago?
Well, certainly it's the first occasion when we have had a major pandemic since the period when I was the health minister, and I certainly think that the work that was done by a whole team of people back then has stood us in good stead. Australia's health response to this pandemic has been pretty outstanding, Peter. Now we have to do everything we humanly can to avoid the economic consequences, which could be in some ways even more dire than the health problems that it threatened a few weeks back. So I think the quicker we end the lockdown, the better. And I hope that everyone, particularly state leaders, are remembering that they are the people who are accountable here. Their job is to look not just at the health interest, but at the national interest. And in the end, we live in a democracy, not a doctocracy. Yes, we have to take the expert advice, but in the end, it is the political leaders that have got to take responsibility for national decision-making, and all credit to Scott Morrison for wanting us to now move forward out of this period of lockdown as quickly as possible.
I've got to ask you about China. You delivered the very historic free trade agreement that's seen great gains, put our exporters on a level playing field. Certainly wasn't a level playing field before then, but China's up the ante, and it's using, well, I would argue, not being confirmed, of course, it's using trade as a retaliatory measure over quite proper calls that Australia's made for an independent inquiry into the origins of the pandemic. And it's becoming more of a values debate or certainly a strategic debate, as it was a commercial one in your time. How do we play this with the China relationship?
With great care and caution. Look, what we've got to understand with China is that it is a capricious customer. We see China in commercial terms. They see us in political terms. In fact, being a communist, totalitarian state, they see everything in political terms. And we need to remember that while we trade with them, fine. While we have all sorts of collaborations with them, fine. They are trying to get leverage out of them far beyond the merely commercial. So we have to appreciate that China is a country unlike any other that we deal with.
Just before we go, what of course from some business types, we've heard them in recent weeks, that we sort of have to back down despite the values clash we have with China?
There are too many people in Australia on a whole range of issues who are much better at taking the other fella's side than ours. I mean, in the end, whether it's on the sporting field, on the cultural field, in the marketplace, you've got to be on your country's side. Now, the great thing about Australia is we play fair, we are decent. We want the other person to get a fair go, but in the end, we also want Australia to remain the most wonderful country on earth, and that means standing up for ourselves a bit more sometimes.
Former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, good friend of Alan Jones, good friend of mine, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Peter.